Hello everybody, and happy Thursday to you all, July the 17th. It's nice to be able to visit with you. It's a big day for me because today I finally go back to see my orthopedist. I have an appointment at 1:30 this afternoon, and as you may know, I'm wearing a boot now. Still recovering from my broken leg that I suffered on June the 8th. And he had told me initially this would be an 8 to 9 week recovery, so we're well into that. So I can walk around fairly well with the boot on, in lieu of a cast. But I'm curious. I don't know what he's going to say today. I'm assuming he's going to have me remove the boot and maybe take a few steps. I hope that's what happens anyway, but we shall see. But I'll report back to you tomorrow what he said, and we will go from there, and hopefully we're getting back to full speed, quote unquote, or full quarter speed, or whatever it was before wherever I was before I broke my leg. Anyway, so I'll keep you posted, and thanks for your thoughts and thanks for your prayers and all that. All right, I want to backtrack just a little bit because I want to start the video by talking about Russian progress in the war in Ukraine, and they are making great progress in this war. But I want to go back to some comments that were made by President Trump on Monday. You may recall this past Monday, President Trump was hosting the Secretary General of NATO in the Oval Office, Mark, I believe it's Rutte, R-U-T-T-E. And while he was there in front of the press, I always give Trump credit. I'll give him, I'm Mr. Objective, at least to try to be. Trump is absolutely transparent, folks. He is not shy when it comes to talking to the press, and he has the press in the Oval Office very often, something you rarely saw with his predecessor. But when the topic came to Russia, Trump said that he is very unhappy. I am very unhappy with Russia. And he also announced at that time a deal, and I've talked about this week, to sell more weapons to NATO allies with the understanding that they will send the weapons to Ukraine. I mean, what else can I say about this? It's just an absolute losing effort. It's like you betting on the worst team in baseball to win the World Series. It's just not going to happen. But it's just such a colossal waste of money, resources, time, things we could be tending to that really need our attention and our investment. Instead, we're just sinking money into a losing effort in Ukraine. And for what? That nobody can explain this. Why? Nobody can explain why we're doing this when these people are not idiots that are in the federal government, in the Pentagon, in the State Department, in the executive branch. They're not idiots. They've got to know this is an absolute losing effort. Is it because of just absolute unhinged, unfounded, unrational hatred of Russia? Is it because you actually believe that Putin is going to try and take all of Western Europe? I mean, what exactly do you think is going on here? Putin is just trying to reclaim land that rightfully belongs to Russia, and he went in here. We talked about this ad nauseum. Why he did that? He was completely justified for going into Ukraine. We are on the wrong side of this issue. We are on the wrong side of history. We would be better to just simply stay out of this, but instead we are sinking billions and billions of U.S. taxpayer money to fund a losing effort. It just makes no sense. And you might think things will be different once we get Trump back into office. That was certainly what he led us to believe. But of course, as we see, it's more of the same. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss, at least in terms of foreign policy, folks. Sending even more money and weapons to Ukraine. It makes no sense whatsoever. But of course, Secretary Root was applauding this. He said, "Oh, this is really big." He was just praising it, and so that's just where we are. Trump expressed his further frustration with Putin, whom he recently called absolutely crazy. Putin is absolutely crazy, according to Trump, for ordering strikes in areas of Ukraine. And on Monday, this is reported by CBS News. Now get this. On Monday, Mr. Trump suggested the Russian autocrat had a habit of saying one thing and doing another. Well, who ever heard of such a thing, Mr. President? A person who says one thing and does another. I'm sorry, who else does that? Who else? I'm racking my brain here. Putin says one thing and does another, but there's somebody else that does that. I can't. Can somebody help me here? Who else is it that says one thing and does another? Trump said, quote, "I always hang up after a phone call with Putin. And I say, well, that was a nice phone call. And then missiles are launched into Kiev or some other city. And I say, well, that's strange. After that happens 3 or 4 times, you say the talk doesn't mean anything." Unquote. Tell me about it, Mr. President. The talk doesn't mean anything. Yeah, I'm still seething over what we talked about so far this week. I'm still sore about it. And for you to have the gall to sit there in front of the whole nation and accuse Putin of saying one thing and doing another, or that his talk doesn't mean anything, who the hell are you to say that? You just described yourself, sir. Did you not? He said, I'm not disappointed. I'm disappointed in Putin, but I'm not done with him. But I'm disappointed in him. Well, I'm disappointed in you, Mr. President. And a lot of people are, because you're doing a lot of great things for which I give you credit. But you're not doing what you told us explicitly you would do. And there's a lot of pissed off Americans right now, Mr. Trump, I'm telling you. And it would be wise for you to swallow your pride, tamp down your ego, reverse course, and do the right thing with special regard to the Epstein files, which I'm not letting go. People may get sick of hearing it, but folks, this is big. And for Trump to accuse Putin of the very thing he does is just rich, if you ask me. So anyway, he goes on and on in this interview, talking about trying to negotiate with Putin. Now, as you know, Trump ultimately gave Putin an ultimatum, which we talked about this week. He gave him 50 days to have a ceasefire in the war with Ukraine. Trump, who is, of course, in no position to make demands of anybody, at least Russia, he doesn't have the moral authority, and he also doesn't have the goods to back up any threats he may make. Right now, Trump is like a yapping chihuahua at the heels of Putin. He has no leverage. Maybe he thinks he does, but he doesn't. But he has managed to give Putin a 50-day ultimatum. In 50 days, there's got to be a ceasefire or else. To which, of course, I said, Putin has got to be saying, or else what? What are you going to do? And Lindsey Graham said, well, if you don't have a ceasefire by 50 days, why don't you ask the Ayatollah what's going to happen? Now, Russian President Medvedev, or he's not president, Putin's president. He's past president, I believe. Maybe he's the prime minister. Medvedev, I need to look at my notes. In response to these threats that Trump made, he said Russia didn't care. That's what he said. Russia didn't care. Trump is making his threats, and he's saying you got 50 days to ceasefire. If you don't, among other things, Trump has said he's going to have 100% sanctions, whatever that means, on Russia, to which Medvedev says we just really don't care. Now, if you go back in time to the Biden administration, this has been ongoing for years, as you know. Biden also placed sanctions on Russia. So this sanction game has been going on for a long, long time. Prior to Biden, prior to Trump's first term, they've been there for years, decades even. So Biden places more sanctions on Russia. Do you know what happened in subsequent years after the Biden sanctions were levied against Russia? Do you know what happened to Russia? Their economy grew. Russia's economy grew. It's as if the sanctions don't even matter. And I would submit that they really don't. The Russian economy is doing quite well. The Russian military is doing quite well, obviously. We have pushed them into this economic alliance with China and India and other nations called BRICS. Russia is basically saying, if you don't want to play ball with us, then we'll just play with somebody else. But our sanctions on them are having very little discernible effect as far as I can tell. So here we are. Sooner or later, the Trump administration is going to have to deal with reality, and they're going to have to understand you're not going to tell Russia what to do. Russia is rumbling on, folks. Now let me spend just a minute talking about what's happening in Ukraine, and I was watching yesterday, of course, as is my custom, the Duran, and I was listening to my buddy Alexander Mercouris talking about the current Russian offensive in Ukraine. Alexander Mercouris has a lot of sources, very credible sources, particularly with anything geopolitical. The Duran is where you want to go. Just trust me on that. They can tell you what's going on in the world. They have the sources to back up their information, and Alexander is uncannily correct. But he is saying that his sources are telling him that there's about to be a Russian offensive on a majorly strategic town in Ukraine called Pokrovsk, Pokrovsk. This is a town that is in the Donbass, I believe they call it the Oblast, the Donbass region of Ukraine, and that the Russians are planning a major offensive in Pokrovsk, which is a very strategic town. A lot of steel is made there. It's a big transportation hub, I understand, and shipping and whatnot. And Russia is going to launch an offensive there. And according to Alexander, and this is going to be huge. He says not if they take Pokrovsk, but when they take it, it's going to be huge. And the plan is, after Russia basically reclaims Pokrovsk, after that, they're going after Kiev. And I would submit to you that once they capture Kiev, it's over. It's over now, if you ask me. But once Russia captures Kiev, which they eventually will do, it is over. And sooner or later, the Trump administration and our NATO allies have got to understand this thing is over. You are financing a dog. Russia is going to win this war. Any objective person who has any geopolitical IQ or sense at all understands Russia is going to win this war, folks. So to send more money and to send more equipment is utter, sheer folly. Now, I have said that ultimately what's going to happen, the people who have enriched themselves because of this war, like Zelensky, they're going to go into exile. They're going to move somewhere to some mansion in the in the south of France or South America or Miami Beach or somewhere to one of their beachfront mansions they have, thanks to the American taxpayer. You're welcome. And they're going to be a martyr for the rest of their life. The true leader of Ukraine is now living in exile in the lap of luxury, of course. That's what's going to happen. But as far as the war goes, Russia is going to win this thing, and it is as simple as that. All right, I want to move on. I want to talk about, we're up to our necks in hypocrites, but there's one hypocrite I want to talk about specifically right now, and it is the genteel senator from the state of Vermont, Bernie the Commie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, who of course left the Democratic Party. I guess they weren't leftist enough for him. He now identifies as an independent, but he votes with the Democrats, of course. But this story appeared in the Washington Free Beacon, and it is talking about the hypocrisy of Senator Bernie Sanders. And I want to read a couple of excerpts from this article that was written by Andrew Kerr and published on the 16th, a couple of days ago, or yesterday rather. The way Senator Bernie Sanders tells it, the only way to fight the oligarchs is to travel like one. The Socialist Senator's campaign spent nearly $230,000 on chartered private jets during the second quarter of 2025 as the senator continued to jet set the nation on his nationwide Fighting Oligarchy tour, according to Federal Election Commission records released this past Tuesday. The campaign contracted exclusively with Ventura Jets, a New York company that specializes in providing private airfare for the same sort of corporate leaders that Sanders has demonized since launching his tour in February. Now get this. Sanders' private jet budget during the second quarter of this year exceeded $222,000. Exceeded the nearly $222,000 his campaign spent on private airfare during the first 3 months of the year, and shows the Vermont senator remains unapologetic about living a millionaire's lifestyle while propagating socialist rhetoric on the campaign trail against oligarchs and corporate special interests whom he's equated to heroin addicts driven by greed. Quote from Bernie, you think I'm going to be sitting on a waiting line at United while 30,000 people are waiting, unquote, Sanders said during a Fox News interview in May in response to the Washington Free Beacon's report on his private jet spending. Quote, you run a campaign and you do 3 or 4 or 5 rallies in a week. It's the only way you can get around to talking to 30,000 people. No apologies for that, unquote, Sanders said about his private jet use. Quote, that's what campaign travel is all about. We've done it in the past. We're going to do it in the future, unquote. That's Bernie Sanders. Bernie, you are a effing hypocrite. He's sick. Here's Bernie Sanders. Have you noticed he doesn't talk about millionaires anymore? He's talking about billionaires now. You know why? Because he's a millionaire. He's a multimillionaire who owns 3 luxury homes, and Lord knows only what else, jetting across the country on private jets at huge expense, paid for by the suckers who donate to him, and he's not even running for anything, on his Fight the Oligarchs tour in the corporate greed. Bernie the billionaire riding around on private jets. Bernie the millionaire, I don't think he's a billionaire. Condemning billionaires and corporate executives and rich corporations, people that have any money. That's just not right. It's okay for Bernie, mind you. He's such a hypocrite. God, this guy is such a hypocrite. I saw him recently on Joe Rogan's show, and I was yelling at my laptop, Joe, ask him the question. What question? Bernie, why are you such a hypocrite? Why is it that you're condemning anybody that's got more money than you've got, but somehow it's okay for you to have millions of dollars, it's okay for you to have 3 luxurious homes, and it's okay for you to fly around the country on private jets paid for by your suckers, but it's wrong for everybody else? Somehow it's wrong for anybody else to have more than apparently you've got. So what's the criteria now, Bernie? 4 homes? We know 3 is okay. So it must be that 4 homes is bad. We know that having millions of dollars is okay because we know you've got millions, so apparently now it's billions. That's where you got to draw. That's just not right. You got to draw the line there. You can't have billions of dollars. This makes me so angry, folks. I cannot stand hypocrites, and we are up to our eyeballs in hypocrites. From the current occupant of the White House, I'm sorry, but it's true, hello Epstein files, to the communist senator from Vermont who wants to fly around the country lecturing all of us on the morality that he upholds somehow and how it's evil that anybody's got more money than he's got. You freaking hypocrite. Folks, I have never been like this in my life. I am not a wealthy man by whatever standards, by some standards in the world. I guess I am a wealthy man. I own my home. I have, cars and food to eat and clothes to wear and a job to go to once I get better. So by some standards, I am wealthy, and I am grateful for everything that I do have. Although by some standards of the world, I'm not wealthy at all. I'm not a millionaire, not a billionaire. But there's a lot of Americans out there who have worked hard, saved their money, invested wisely, and they have become millionaires, and some become billionaires. And you know what I've got to say about that? Good for them. I would love to shake their hand and pat them on the back and say, good job. Now, I realize I'm not talking about people who enrich themselves via criminal behavior, including almost, Lord only knows how many people that are in Congress that go into Congress with moderate wealth and suddenly a few years later are multimillionaires. I'm not talking about them. They should be ashamed of themselves. I'm talking about people who work hard, play by the rules, and, for some of them, they become wealthy because of their work ethic and their industriousness and their creativity. And to them, they're able to drive fine automobiles. Maybe they can buy a vacation home. And they've got a lot of money they can live comfortably on. And to people like that who did it the right way, I got nothing but praise for you and congratulations. Good for you. There's not a jealous bone in my body, not an envious bone in my body. I think it's fantastic. That's the American dream, is it not? If my neighbor does well, should I be jealous of him or should I congratulate him? But here's Bernie Sanders in typical Democrat fashion, typical socialist fashion, typical communist fashion, who's got to demonize anybody who's got a nickel more than he does. Everybody in corporate America, according to Bernie Sanders, is evil. Any American who's got a nickel more than he got is evil, according to Bernie Sanders. You notice he never says a damn word about Nancy Pelosi. He never says a word about all these other politicians who come into office with modest wealth and wind up multi-millionaires. He don't say a blooming word about that. It's just these evil, corporate, greedy CEOs. I've never been able to get anybody to define the word greed for me. Whenever I hear somebody use the word greed, I either ask them or I always wonder, what do you mean by greed? What is greed anyway? What is greed? If Bernie Sanders looks at me he looks in my kitchen cupboard perhaps and sees it full of assorted canned foods or whatever, he could look at me and say, "You're greedy." Well, what is greed? Now, I know there is such a thing as greed, but how do you define it in terms of how many possessions you have? If I've got 2 cars and you've got 3 cars, am I to assume you're greedy? We play fast and loose with the word greed, if you ask me. You shouldn't look at what another person has and just automatically assume, well, they're just greedy. You don't know that. You don't know what their circumstances are. But Bernie uses the word greed like so many other Democrats use the word racism. It's just every other word out of his mouth. He's greedy. We got to fight against greed. Well, what do you mean? Bernie, if you want to fight greed, why don't you fight the frickin' government, for heaven's sakes? If you want to fight corruption, why don't you start in the Senate, in the House? Stop looking at corporations and private American citizens. Why don't you clean up Washington first, you hypocrite? I'm so sick of this clown. I can't believe anybody listens to a blooming word this guy says. He is such a hypocrite. Bernie, if you ever wind up homeless and penniless, then maybe I'll listen to you. But right now, your words are hollow, and you are a hypocrite. All right, one more thing before I go. This is just a general story that you may be interested in. It's really sad in a way, I guess. It's sad how things ended. But have any of you ever heard of the turbaned torpedo? The turbaned torpedo. I'm talking about a man from India. His name was Fauja Singh, F-A-U-J-A, Fauja Singh. Fauja Singh was a marathon runner, and he was really good. He was also 114 years old. This generational athlete became the oldest man to run a full marathon in 2011, completing the Toronto Marathon at age 100 and conquering the Hong Kong Marathon's 10-kilometer race 2 years later, which is just simply incredible. Unfortunately, the turbaned torpedo has run his final race. He died this past Monday after being hit by a car in his native village in Punjab, suffering severe head injuries during the collision, and he died shortly thereafter. It was a fatal hit and run. The turbaned torpedo, Fauja Singh, died at the age of 114. So he died after being struck by a vehicle. Heaven only knows how much older this man would have lived to. 114 is fairly impressive. I don't know if that made him the oldest man in the world or not. I don't know who's got the record now. But 114 years on this earth for the turbaned torpedo. All I can say is maybe we need to look into marathon running. I don't know, or maybe the Indian diet or what have you. But that story just caught my eye. Fauja Singh, the turbaned torpedo, lived to 114 years. What do you think about that? Okay, folks, give me your comments down below about what we talked about today, if you would please. I would greatly appreciate that. Love hearing from you. Thank you for the emails. Thank you for the buy me a coffee. Some of you have been really generous lately, and I really do appreciate that. Thank you so much. It's very kind. Make sure you like this video, please, and subscribe to the channel. If you have not, I would really appreciate that. Got to go to the doctor here in a little bit, so I'll let you know what happens tomorrow. Thanks for joining me, everybody, and I will talk to you then.